For about a year, I was on Instagram pretty much daily. This alternate universe that we can get sucked into. I had my husband set the alarm for a minute, and I'm just going to share with you the couple that I did see and just my thought process. My life is boring. Well, my husband won't let me paint my cupboards. So then here we are back to marriage again. You can really get into a fighting state in your mind. It is fun to see all these different things that people are doing, but then you can be like, oh, but here's my life and I'm not doing that, and I wish we could do that. The two most destructive things about social media, today we're going to talk about it. Stay tuned for the second one, which is the most grievous sin in my opinion. Before I get into that though, hello, my name is Danielle and I teach other Christian mothers how to parent their children biblically. I have 6 children, and for so long I felt just so lost until one day it just dawned on me that God is the first parent. He's the perfect parent. I can look at God and see how he raised his children. And since I've begun doing that, I feel like I have more of a grasp on this parenting thing. We're not alone. If you're in the right place, like and subscribe. Turn on that notification bell so you never miss when a video goes out. The first destructive thing when it comes to social media in Christian mothers is I believe it leads to comparing to one another. 2 Corinthians 10:12, it says, "Not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves, but when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they are without understanding." I just love that one. And I talk about that one so much in marriage as well. We can look at other people and we can compare, but when we do that, we're without understanding, because my life is going to look different than your life. Your life is going to look different than my life. So it isn't even the same thing. How can we compare ourselves to one another? Also, we're all in different stages of life. We cannot compare our middle to someone else's end, or our beginning to someone else's middle. We're without understanding when we do that. I have 6 kids. Maybe you have less than that. Our lives are going to look different. That and our husbands are different. When we submit to our husbands as unto the Lord, we are submitting to their uniqueness. We submit to our own husband. I don't submit to your husband and you don't submit to mine. What my husband thinks is a good way to do something, your husband might disagree. So our lives are going to look so different. That is certainly for marriage, but that applies to parenting as well, because if our husbands are the leaders of our home, well, they're the leaders of our children too, and how we raise them and the things that we're putting into them, the things that our husbands say is okay and not okay. All of our families are going to look different. So we are without understanding. It says in the beginning, not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves. So commending themselves would be people who think like, oh, look at me. At least I think I'm understanding that right. And how can we compare ourselves to that? You know what I mean? Like maybe they're putting on a front, maybe they're putting on a show, like on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. They're putting their best foot forward. They're saying, hey, look at me, and a lot of times a lot of these things are, not necessarily bad, but people are after the likes and the engagement and things like this. And so it's like, is it really genuine? Galatians 6:4, but let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor. So we're supposed to test our own work. That makes me think of Romans 12:2 that says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what the will of God is. Well, then you'll be able to test and approve. But, we need to test it. We can test our own work and be like, okay, is this, godly or is it ungodly? We can test it. But if we are comparing to somebody else, let's say, then his reason to boast will be in himself and not in his neighbor. Your neighbor may have all the methods, all of this that work for them, but maybe it doesn't work for you. And when something does work for you, you won't have to say, hey, I got it over here from my neighbor who did such and such a thing. You go up the mountain yourself and you pursue God. You do what is right for your family. Galatians 1:10, for am I seeking the approval of man or of God, or am I trying to please man? If I was still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. We're talking about comparing ourselves to one another. This is the first thing that I think can be so destructive when it comes to social media. Now, for about a year, I was on Instagram pretty much daily. I was pretty active and I was promoting my podcast, The Fighting Wife, and I was teaching other women how to end the fighting in their marriage. I mean, that's a good thing. And if you want details for that podcast, see the link below. I will link that podcast, which I am slowly filtering onto YouTube. God has transformed my marriage. I've spent the last 8 years seeking God in my marriage, how to end the fighting. And that so much applies to parenting. I mean, if we're fighting in our marriage, it's going to overflow into our parenting as well. But anyways, I was on there pretty much daily. And I really kind of slipped into this toxic thing. Like, what I was talking about wasn't bad, but they have filters and things like this. And we're not flawless, right? Like, we do care what other people think of us, and I found this filter that was pretty natural on there, and but made me look better, you know. And I would use that as I was doing these little reels for Instagram. And yes, I did reach people, and I definitely, had some instant messages with people and really touched people's lives in that way. But I just, honestly, now that I have taken a step back from it, I can tell you that I felt, in a matter of a couple months, I felt just very lousy because my reality wasn't matching up with this person that I saw on my account, because in real life I have flaws, I have blemishes, and it's almost like this alternate universe that we can get sucked into. But in preparation for this video, I did a little experiment. I had my husband time me for a minute, and I was going to get on Instagram, which I'm not on there all that often anymore. I still do have that account called Stop the Fighting Wife. That stop period, the period fighting period wife. You can go check it out if you want. It is still up there, but I'm not on there daily. But I just wanted to do this test to see how I would be sucked in. And I had my husband set the alarm for a minute. And I'm just going to share with you the couple that I did see and just my thought process with each of those. The first thing I seen on Instagram was from this really good account. It's called American Family Road Trip. They're a Christian couple who has like 8 children, I believe. And it's just very fun to watch and see what they're up to, and they have a Christian spin on everything. She homeschools, and I do like that. She was the first account that I followed when I first started my Instagram account. So her and her family, they come up first because usually I do look at their stuff, so I'm sure the algorithm has me down, that I will stop and look at their stuff. And they're on a sandy beach somewhere, and the kids are in the shot, and the first thing I thought of was, oh, it would be so nice to go on a vacation. And then your mind just spirals out of control. Oh, we never go on vacation. I should ask my husband if we can go on vacation. And your mind can just spiral out of control. But you know what? Vacations cost a lot of money. I know with this particular account, I have, gotten sucked into, because it's like, it is fun to see all these different things that people are doing, but then you can be like, oh, well, but here's my life and I'm not doing that, and I wish we could do that. They renovated a bus and all of this, but that's great for them. I believe her name is Brittany and Jared is her husband's name, maybe. American Family Road Trip. That's their life. My life is different. My life is more of a slow pace. We homeschool, we're together 100% of the time, but it's not so wild and flashy. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm just saying, like, do you see how you can compare yourself to someone else? Like, well, my life is boring. What's worse is you can go to your husband And then it starts coming off as complaining, and your husband's, well, what's wrong with this life that I've given you, and you can just spiral out of control. I'm not saying that account is bad, but I'm just saying, like, just our natural fallen body, this flesh, we do that. We just instantly go to compare. Second thing that I seen on Instagram was this mom talking about something to do with marriage and her kids. And the first thing I thought of was, wow, her kitchen is really clean. Now, I know for a fact that she's older, her kids are grown. They're out, so I can't go to that place and be like, oh, well, my kitchen doesn't look like that. Of course, my kitchen doesn't look like that. But immediately, that's just where our mind goes. And then my mind went to her kitchen cupboards. They're white and they're just beautiful and all of this. I'm like, well, my husband won't let me paint my cupboards. So then here we are back to marriage again, comparing, and you can really get into a fighting state in your mind. I heard a comedian one time on Instagram. It was this woman comedian on Instagram, and she said, I had an entire fight with my husband in my mind. We can do that though, we just go to that place. But you know what? If I had those white kitchen cupboards, they wouldn't look that nice, because I got little kids who are coming by with dirty fingers touching up all the cupboards. You do see what I'm saying? But we just go to that place where instantly we start comparing. The third thing that I seen on Instagram was an advertisement for an online app for teaching kids how to read. And I homeschool, as I've said before, and I have several children who are still learning how to read. And, my mind can instantly go, well, we need that, because then, my child will learn how to read. But the thing is I can just stay the course. I mean, what I do with my kids is a beautiful thing. They sit on my lap and we go through it, sounding out, and we go through together. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with this app either. I'm sure it has helped lots of other people, but I'm just saying, I don't need to spend money to teach my children how to read. Perhaps it is very valuable that my kids sit with me and we get that precious time that we're never going to have back. Again, our mind just goes to the extreme. We just go to comparing. We live in this fallen body. We live in this, selfish ambition, the acts of the flesh. We are unto that in our flesh. The fourth Instagram reel that I seen before the timer went off, it was this man talking about the damage that you can do to children if they have nightlights in their room. So instantly my mind goes to my boys who have a nightlight in their bedroom. I'm like, ooh, but you know what, whatever. I mean, they can have a nightlight. I mean, it's not, fear sells. And I'm not saying that having a nightlight is the best thing, but you know what? My kids, my two boys, they like to have a nightlight in the basement. Is it really that big of a deal? And also, if I were to bring this up to my husband and say, oh, nightlights are bad, all of this, he might say, honey, it's not that big of a deal. And then I could start fighting with him about that, because, I want him to see my point of view. Second destructive thing about social media, and what I think is a grievous sin in and of itself, is that the comparing can lead to coveting. Luke 12:15, and he said to them, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. So my mind also goes to the 10 commandments. Commandment number 10 says, do not covet. We need to guard our heart against that, above all things, because it is the wellspring of life. Scripture says that. When we watch all these little clips, that are curated directly to us, because the algorithm, it studies you and it studies your personality, what you stop and what you look at, so then it will push out more things like that. It is very invasive in that way. Honey, I think our AC is here. I see FedEx here. And he's slowing down. I don't think he can see. Yeah, honey, that's our AC. The algorithm knows you, and it's very invasive in that way, and it knows what you will stop and what you will look at. And it is this coveting posture where it's like we're looking, the grass is greener somewhere else, and then we're not content and happy with what God has given us. Matthew 6:19-21. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The thing is about social media, we can get our mind so stuck on the externals and this person's got this and this person's going here and I want that. And it becomes about me, and it becomes about I don't have what I want. And we can become very discontented. I know when I put down social media, and I mean, yes, I do look at it once in a while, but not nearly as much as I used to back in the days when I was doing the Stop the Fighting Wife, that account. I was sucked in more often, but I really felt like God was pulling me away from that and, wanting me to lay that down. I just started feeling so much better about myself. Hey, honey, he turned around. I don't think it was for us. Romans 13:9. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So coveting, it is one of the 10 commandments. We are commanded not to covet. And I think that we can even be proactive where it's like if we know that we will begin to covet and that we will begin to be ungrateful for what we have and all that God has done for us, we need to not put ourselves in those positions. I had my husband set the timer again for a minute, and this time I typed in the little search bar, I typed in Christian homemaker. So then I found everything that was curated towards Christian homemakers, and let me tell you, my mind spiraled in an even worse place than the first time I did this. The first thing I saw was these children loading wood up on like a homestead. They were loading wood into a truck, and my mind right away went to, oh, I want to live in the country. I want to live on a homestead. That's always been my dream. And so right off the bat, I can start comparing in that way, right? The second thing I thought of was, oh, that girl is dressed super cute. My kids look like bums compared to that. Her hair was cute in pigtails and she was wearing a dress and some nice shoes and all of this. And you know that in the video they were probably putting their best foot forward, but then I'm comparing my kids, and you know what I mean? It's just, social media is such a way for us to compare ourselves to others and just get in a place that is not good. I'm not saying that it can't be a good thing, but our flesh just goes that way. It really does. And then we need to take thoughts captive and all of this, which make things harder for us, but it would just be easier if we just would try to avoid it. The second reel that I saw under that, it was talking about how God created a woman's body to basically make children and basically be like an incubator kind of. I can't remember the exact word she used, but my mind right away went to, well, I've had C-sections, and that's really been a sad thing that I've had to overcome in my life. And so immediately I'm thinking, thoughts like, you're not a true woman because you had to have a C-section, and then so I continued watching it. And then it's talking about the Proverbs 31 woman and how she woke up before the rest of her family. Yes, in an ideal situation, that would be great. But what about the mom who's up all night with her baby, and you have to sleep in a little bit? Or what about, I'm in this season of life where I have some kids who are older and I don't have to roll out of bed super early in the morning. Does that mean that I'm not a good Christian homemaker because I'm not up before my kids? We can start again comparing each other, and the Bible never says this is good or this is bad. It just says it of her. The third reel that I saw under that tab was actually a really good one. She was making sourdough bread, and it was just a really short clip, but she was making sourdough bread. She just had one line of text on there, and I want to read it to you because I did really like it. We're not called to be trad wives. The 50s were not heaven. We're called to be a biblical woman in whatever time period we live. And I do absolutely 100% believe in that we don't need to necessarily even do everything that the Proverbs 31 woman did. In the Christian culture, we love to talk about the Proverbs 31 woman and how we have to do everything that she did. And you know what? We don't necessarily have to do everything that she did or in the order. You do what you're called to. That makes me think of the book of Esther, how you were born for such a time as this. You know, whatever you're called to, your life may look a little different than the Proverbs 31 woman. Maybe you're not called to go and buy the field. That's okay. If you got one or two things out of this video, comment below, hit that notification bell so you never miss when a video goes live, and leave me a comment. How many children do you have? What are the things that you struggle with? Let me know how I can pray for you and I can come around you and be your sister in that way. And until next time, bye for now.